My dear friends, this is the lecture on Buddhism. If you are listen to this very carefully, whether you are a Buddhist or a non-Buddhist, you can get rid of your suffering and gain the highest happiness in your life. My dear friends, you know, the world is always plagued by wars and terrorism. Even the peace-loving people are not safe in this world. Powerful countries force their friendly nations to join in destructions and killing in the name of freedom, in the name of human rights. This is the shortest way to produce more enemies and to supply substantial excuse for criminal-minded people to propel terrorism. You know, everybody enjoys the living and maintain their rights. There is middle path. There is a right path. There is a path that everybody enjoys living, that everybody can maintain his or her rights. There is a path that brings happiness, security, and contentment to entire world. It is the path of the Buddha. If one practices Buddhism, he or she is providing security and happiness to all living beings. He or she becomes a lighthouse that signals others the state of real security, because only Buddhism is the one that claims at its very inceptions to be the teaching that guides mankind and all gods towards happiness and prosperity. My dear friends, Buddhism that is properly understood and systematically practiced is beneficial to the entire world. The world will definitely learn what happiness is and what peaceful coexistence means. Therefore, we as Buddhists are obliged to follow the righteous way, the Dhamma way, the Buddha's way is the path of peace. My dear friends, the Buddha's appearance in the world is to find out the causes of unhappiness and unsatisfactoriness, where no one could understand. A Buddha will only appear in the world if the world is full of sorrow, unhappiness, and misery. The Lord Buddha found the secrets and made it known to the world nearly 2600 years ago, and people still remembers them. So it will take a long time for the same event to happen again. Everyone is busy with so many unnecessary things and do not understand that they must start to do what is the most important things in their lives without further procrastinations. You must think why all the Buddhas appeared in India. The reason is because India is a country where one could experience all the extremes of life. The Buddha was a royal prince. He spent a pleasurable and comfortable life. He moved from season to season into different palaces. He was guarded and not permitted to see outside the palace walls. He lived in this situation created by his father, the Sakyan king Suddhodana. The king remembered the predictions by his advisory board a few days after the birth of the prince. However, in spite of all the careful planning by his father, the prince's mind was very alert. The moment he was exposed to the outside world, he began to ponder, to think carefully on what is life. This is the reason that soon after realization, he started to renounce everything and tried to find the reality or the truth of life through the practice of a hard life. If the world is full of happiness, then we would not be seeing, or there will be no appearance of a Buddha. However, my dear friends, there is no necessity for you to worry on that further. You should now start striving diligently, and unless you yourself have determination, you will not find your liberation. It all depends personally on you alone and your own efforts, as no one else can help you. My dear friends, I earnestly request you to think well what I am saying in this lecture. What I am saying here is what Lord Buddha says. But you can just forget Lord Buddha if you happen to be a non-Buddhist, or forget who the lecturer is. But think, are these facts true or false? If they are true and correct, apply them to your life and be happy. If they are wrong or false, just forget them. My dear friends, at the very outset of my lecture, I would like to say that Buddhism is neither an ordinary philosophy, nor is an ordinary ethical system. It is a moral and philosophical teaching founded on the bedrock of facts that can be tested and verified by personal experience. Actually speaking, Buddhism cannot be called a religion either. If you go through the Oxford Dictionary, you will find the meaning of the word religious, which says that believing in and worshipping a superhuman controlling power or powers, especially a personal god or gods. But Buddhism is not a system of faith and worship which emphasizes the existence of a supernatural god, my dear friends. Now I'm going to talk about the concept called suffering. You know, in brief, this body itself is a cause of suffering. Buddhism rests on this pivot of suffering, but it does not allow that. Buddhism is pessimism. It is neither totally pessimistic nor totally optimistic. On the contrary, it teaches a truth that lies midway between them. Whilst emphasizing the truth of suffering, the Buddha suggests a means to get rid of this suffering and gain the highest happiness. The highest happiness is the final goal of Buddhism. So for us, firstly, it is better to get happiness up to at least some extent. Now let's see how to gain this happiness. For this we must see the cause of suffering. In the Dhammapada, in Piyavagga states, Tanhaya jayati shoko, Tanhaya jayati bhayang, Tanhaya vippamuttassa, Natti soko kuto bhayang. It means, from craving arises sorrow, from craving arises fear. To him who is freed from craving, there is no sorrow and there is no fear from anywhere. Now, my dear friends, you will see the cause of this suffering is craving. What is craving? In the Pali language, it is described as tanha, means intense longing or intense desires, hankering or intense appetite. Now, the difficulty which we find is that how can we come to a cessation of suffering? As I have mentioned earlier, firstly, better to get happiness up to some extent. That is to say, cessation of suffering up to some extent. My dear friends, now you know from craving arises sorrow. Therefore, pertinent questions before you is, how can we avert craving? For example, supposing you see a beautiful lady. At a glance, you think she is beautiful, nice, good. Then you become naturally interested in her. This is the first stage of craving. Sometimes you go ahead and think that I must own her. Then firstly, you speak to her. Sometimes you give her gifts. It may be a chocolate or a ring worth millions. This is the second stage of craving. See, in the first instance of craving is like a seedling. But when it grows up to second stage, then we can see craving is like a tree. You know, we can cut a seedling even by a nail and nip it in the bud. But a tree we can't. We need an axe to cut it. My dear friends, according to Buddhism, you suffer according to craving. That is to say, suffering corresponds in equal proportion to craving. Or the more you crave, the more you suffer. So if you can stop craving at the first stage, you suffer a little. If you have craving at the second stage, you suffer a lot. If you can stop craving at all, you do not suffer at all. I think it's better to mention the Buddhist teaching in relation to this with the wheel of life. In Pali language, it is called paticca samuppada. It means dependent arising or dependent origination. In paticca samuppada or wheel of life, it is mentioned that contact leads to sensation. That is passa paccaya vedana. Because of the six senses, contact or passa sets in. The six senses, salayatana, are the inevitable consequences of mind and matter. Then, dependent on sensation arises craving, or vedana paccaya tanha. And then, craving produces attachment, or tanha paccaya upadana. Now you can see, as I have mentioned earlier, in craving there are two stages. One is that dependent on sensation arises craving. For example, supposing if you see a beautiful thing, then possibly craving arises. If you hear a sweet voice, then again possibly craving arises, and so on, smell, touch, taste. The second stage of craving is that craving produces attachment, or tanhaya paccaya upadana. My dear friends, as I said earlier, in the first stage of craving like a seedling, in the second stage of craving like a tree. So if you can control your mind and cut the seedling, or at the first stage of craving, and if you do not allow this craving to grow or improve up to tree, the second state of craving, then you can live happily. If you allow this craving to improve up to second stage, a tree, you are in a great difficulty. Then you can't live happily. If you can practice this, then you can put an end to craving fully. This is the Buddha's teaching. And you find no suffering, no sorrow. Now let us take another example which can explain craving further. You know Princess Diana, Sri Lankan citizen, as well as you have seen her on televisions or read on papers and have heard about her. And also you are aware that Princess Diana is beautiful, kind, and a good social worker. But Sri Lankan people have had no access to associate her. Why is that? It is because craving on Princess Diana was on the first stage of craving. That is to say, dependent on sensations arises craving. And automatically Sri Lankan people were not allowed, as she was a member of a king's family,